Hello and welcome. I'm Uday Pratap Singh. You're joining us on this special broadcast brought to you, of course, by ASSOCHAM along with TERI and SAP. We are, of course, going to be talking about a very important issue. Achieving sustainability is crucial in present times, and the adoption of sustainable practices now is a necessity rather than a choice. We're going to be, of course, also speaking about how sustainability can aid our national growth, how India can become a sustainable leader in the world, along with a host of other issues. We're joined on this broadcast by a special panel. Shri Kulmeet Bawa, President and MD, SAP Indian Subcontinent, is joining us live. Ambassador Manjeev Singh Puri, Distinguished Fellow, TERI, is also live with us. Shri Anirban Ghosh, Chief Sustainability Officer, Mahindra Group, also joins the panel, as does Ms. Vanita Bhargav, Partner, Khaitan and Company. Welcome all of you, and thank you so much for being with us on this special show. Let me begin with you first, Ambassador Puri. How would you define sustainability? Let me ask a very broad question to you to start the debate in the show today. How would you define sustainability, and is the adoption of sustainable practices now, sir, an essential rather than a choice?
Absolutely. The definition of sustainability is perhaps best seen in the Sustainable Development Goals adopted by the United Nations, where the first four goals are poverty eradication, hunger, education, and medicine. However, let us remember that we have one planet, and let us not forget what Gandhiji said, that, the planet has enough for all of our needs, but not our greed. And so I think it's particularly important that we become cognizant, not just of climate change, decarbonizing the economy, but be cognizant of the need to be much more sustainable. And what do I mean by that? I mean that our lifestyles need to get towards where a country like India perhaps has leadership. It's a country where lifestyles have an inherent element of sustainability in terms of the way things have been done. We have an ethos which brings that. And if we can bring that and mold it along with the modern world and the modern ways of doing things, we could perhaps be leaders in the world for sustainable production and sustainable consumption. These are the words which are the magic words, and we all need to go towards them. Of course, decarbonization is the need of the hour. We need to do something about emissions. We need to do something. But we also need to see that along with the environment, we have societal good, we have better governance, we have equity, and that we take all these things together, perhaps to build a much better world for our future generations than what we have inherited. And I think India, with its ethos of both Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, as well as Gandhiji's understanding that there is enough for everyone, but of course we must be mindful of greed. I think we are particularly well positioned to provide a degree of leadership in the world and be a lodestar for the way the human race can move.
Yeah, I'm going to get to that in just a bit on how India can take the lead. But, Kulmeet Bawa, if I can come to you at this point, how will technology and how does technology help in facilitating sustainable practices? And does this actually end up helping in the efficiency and profitability of a company as well?
Yeah, thanks Uday, and thanks Manjeev. Those were some great thoughts there. Look, technology definitely has a very, very key role today, in helping organizations achieve the sustainability goals, right? And when I'm saying technology, when I use the word technology here, I'm not talking about operational technology. And just to get the distinguish, right? So it's not electric vehicles and solar cells I'm talking about, but what I'm talking about is what we call business technology or information technology, right? And a variety of areas here, Uday. Number one, let's look at digital technologies today, right? Which definitely are helping support sustainable growth all across. And when I say digital technologies, it's AI and ML and all the buzzwords that we use, Internet of Things and blockchain, right? And all of that is actually helping us today. For example, if I look at IoT, and I'll keep this brief, but today we've got IoT solutions which are helping improve the energy efficiency all across, reduce the environmental footprints that Manjeev was talking about. Machine learning today is very clearly helping us marry the whole the demand and the supply, the requirements, thereby reducing waste. Artificial intelligence today is being used all across, even in invention of some latest materials which are biodegradable or which are recyclable. Blockchain, of course, as we know, is helping in the whole, what I would call the cradle to the grave kind of a traceability for products. Analytics continues to do what it does best, right?
Yes.
Helping measure, helping drive performance improvement. And also an example very quickly before I get on to the next point, we have the whole, I think we're calling it the SDG index dashboard that the NITI Aayog is working on today. And it's by virtue of technology that we are building, or that dashboard is being built, focusing on, what are we monitoring, what are we measuring, what are the improvement areas, what are the insights that we are gathering, one state vis-a-vis the others, versus best practices, and how do we improve ourselves. So loads of examples there, but number one, digital technologies. The second piece that I wanted to call out is that today we are living in what we call a very collaborative world with a lot of business networks all around, which can help connect like-minded companies or businesses to collaborate towards a common goal, right? And just this collaboration, the way we view it through a tech lens, can open up brand new revenue streams for companies offering, sustainable products, merely by being able to, increase the reach of these products through these networks. These networks can help monetize waste as well as byproducts, because what is waste to one company could be an essential raw material for another, right? And today in technology, we are able to solve a lot of this. Supply chain disruptions could be solved by building alternate resources. And as you can tell, to your question on, can this help in increasing efficiencies and profitability? Absolutely yes, Uday. I'll pause here, hand back to you, but more if you need it as we move on.
Yes,
Uday.
of course. I will come back to you to take that argument forward. But, Vanitha, coming to you at this point, on the ambit now of the judiciary and also activism, has there been adequate judicial activism to encourage sustainable technology and also aid policy making in this sustainability space?
Thank you there. So yes, the push towards use of technology for achieving sustainability has to some extent come from the judiciary, because although there are some regulations, but the regulations mostly target cleaning the existing technologies rather than incentivizing clean technologies or adopting alternate technologies.
Yeah.
So the judiciary, mostly because of orders passed in various public interest litigations and matters filed before the National Green Tribunal, we have noticed that after orders passed by the courts, various notifications have been passed to make use of alternative clean technology compulsory. So for example, conversion of public transport in Delhi to CNG, that was a push which came from the judiciary. Then supply of lead-free petrol, phasing out vehicles not adhering to emission standards, banning of petcoke as fuel in NCR and pushing for use of alternative fuel like natural gas, etc. Directing thermal power plants to install flue gas desulfurization units that cut emissions, and then passing of directions by virtue of which industries were directed to adopt new technology for achieving zero liquid discharge. So on paper, although there are provisions which says adopt the best technology for reducing emissions and discharge, but again, the push had to come from the judiciary. So while judicial intervention has pushed the adoption of technology which supports sustainability, however, the downside is that it leaves little time for the industry to absorb the capital intensive cost, train personnel, and all the other things that go into adopting new technology. So the policies and regulations that then govern the use of sustainable technology become more punitive in nature. There is a direction from the court, you adopt this new technology within a certain frame of time without realizing there are practical difficulties that go along with it. So therefore, there needs to be reasonable goal setting for a smooth transition towards adoption of
Okay.
alternatives.
Well, let me get in Anirban Ghosh then for a real life example on this very topic and issue. We can see there that background behind you, which obviously shows that Mahindra is very serious about this issue and has been doing a lot in real life terms. So then let me start out by asking you, Anirban, about just telling our viewers a bit about how Mahindra and the group has really adopted sustainable practices in your business and operations.
Thank you for the question, Uday. Mahindra believes that climate is this century's biggest business opportunity. The journey to make the most of this opportunity started about 14 years ago, but we've only just begun. I can say that we've experienced 4 phases so far. First was startup, where we got governance, awareness, and other foundational things going. The second phase was to go deep, where we adopted a common sustainability framework, included sustainability in the business excellence program, and linked sustainability to KRAs of key individuals. The third phase was to express ambition. So we made far-reaching, meaningful, and ambitious commitments, such as becoming carbon neutral by 2040, adopting science-based targets, doubling energy productivity, adopting 100% renewable energy, using a carbon price, and so on. So in this phase, the long-term goals were all set. And I would say we are in the 4th phase now, which is about taking action or scaling up action, where we are scaling implementation in known areas of action. There is also an element of adopting new areas of action as they become visible to the business. Now, all this is helping our current businesses to be more resilient by reducing cost, creating new streams of value, reducing risk, attracting capital, building employee engagement, and so on. But sustainability action has also helped us sow the seeds for future growth through investments in climate-friendly businesses such as solar energy, waste to energy, green buildings, micro-irrigation, automobile recycling, shared mobility, and of course electric mobility. This is a quick snapshot of some of the ways in which Mahindra has built sustainability into its businesses and practices.
Okay, well, you've obviously done a lot in this space already, as is pretty evident from what you just said, Anirban. But for those organizations watching who are not quite sure where to begin and what to do, where should they begin their sustainable journey? What would you tell them?
Uday, there is nothing better than good leadership to make things happen. So ensuring that the board has competence to leverage sustainability to grow the business is a good thing to do. For businesses, opportunity lies in the overlap between planet and profit. There is a common myth that sustainability costs money. Organizations must question this myth. They can begin by identifying an area of sustainability action that helps the business make or save money. In general, easy programs to begin with are energy efficiency, adoption of renewable energy, and ensuring no waste goes to landfill. But depending on the industry, which area would be immediately impactful could be identified.
Yeah, okay. Vanita, if I can quickly bring you in here. In India, they say that, the only way for effective implementation is perhaps good regulation. We're seeing with the current COVID crisis as well, people aren't masking up, and which is why we need to have fines, to obviously encourage people to mask up, which is a deterrent. As far as this space is concerned, the Indian sustainable energy space, is it regulated enough according to you? And what are some legal lacunae which still exist in the framework, which perhaps should be and can be plugged?
Yes, so of course there are various regulations, based on the principle of sustainable development, which is applicable to all industries, like getting environment clearance, forest clearance, consent to establish, etc. If you're dealing with hazardous waste, e-waste, plastic waste, there are rules which have been framed. The industries cannot be set up in various eco-sensitive zones, etc. But as far as renewable energy, for example, is concerned, they're exempted from environment clearance. And as the scale of renewable projects increases, as the number of renewable projects, solar projects, wind energy projects increase, certain issues are coming to light. For example, recently the Supreme Court had to intervene because in Rajasthan, the great Indian bustard bird, they were, getting tangled in the transmission lines. And so the Supreme Court had to step in and pass an order that from now onwards, all transmission lines for renewable energy projects will be underground. Now that is, within a certain time frame, which not many projects which were already in the process can complete. So the regulations, I feel, don't keep pace with the technology. For example, even like you said, masking. Suddenly there was an issue of bio-waste. There was no even though there are these waste management regulations.
Yeah.
But the issue of segregating and using this waste as a fuel, that the technologies are coming up to use this waste as a fuel, but those who are adopting this technology face a issue in how to get segregated waste, and whether the municipal corporations are up to the mark in providing them, because the industries cannot be expected to go out and that which is being expected of them, they can't go out and collect all that. So yes, there are certain exemptions which were given to projects, to renewable energy projects and projects which support sustainability. But those regulations should keep pace with the technology, and some anticipation, some thinking, some think tank has to be developed to keep pace with that.
Okay, Gurmeet, you were of course touching upon technology in your opening comments. I have to ask you then specifically about digitization. How is digitization helping bring about greater transparency, across supply chains, which would also perhaps help in ethical sourcing?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And just taking off from where I left off, look, digitization is clearly helping embed intelligence into the whole business processes per se today, right? With technologies that I was talking about, whether it's IoT or AI or ML or any of the digital technologies, right? And by actually embedding these inside into the very fabric of the solutions, we are being able to enable companies to make more informed business decisions today, right? And by virtue of that, what we are seeing is a plethora of improvements already across the value chain. And, Anirban talked about a little bit of it, but whether it is, predicting supply chain disruptions, that's becoming possible today, making manufacturing way more cost effective, reducing environmental impact, all through technology, all through digitization, even just actively listening to stakeholder feedback, Uday, right? And the concerns that stakeholders have as part of the business priorities. So that's becoming possible thanks to digitization. That's point number one. Point number two, look, I just want to call out that today companies need to anticipate the whole the footprint or the carbon footprint for any business decision that they make, right? Also the long-term impact on society if they can. And why I say this, the long-term impact is that merely managing or merely measuring the carbon footprint of the direct production today within their own house is not enough. Given that, almost 5 times or 5.5 times greater emissions happen through the value chain or through the supply chain that you mentioned, right? 5 times greater than the direct enterprise that we're looking at. Therefore, measuring and reducing emissions across the value chain becomes super critical, right? And in a lot of cases, this actually means inventing, brand new value chains that may no longer be linear, that may be circular in the new age that we're looking at. So that's the second point. To your point on the whole sourcing and the ethical sourcing, absolutely. Today we are seeing technology, and I spoke about the business networks, but today we are able to ensure that suppliers that are coming through these business networks are properly scanned, right, or screened for their ESG practices before they are onboarded to do commerce, which is a fantastic thing, right? So today, it's no longer just what's your price, what's your delivery mechanism, what's the quality of the product. but we are also able to see due to technology what's the overall sustainability performance there.
Okay.
So absolutely, it's helping in all metrics.
Right.
Digitization is a big and important mantra there.
Okay, just taking it back to now the India story, Ambassador Puri, you know, how do we make India a sustainability leader? What's the way forward on that? And also, can this actually help our national growth? You know, we often talk of sustainability as if it's some sort of burden or some sort of charity that we're doing, but can it help the Indian growth story as well? And how do we make India a sustainability leader? Sir, what's the way forward?
Thank you very much. You used an expression just now that people see sustainability as a burden. But I hope you heard Anirban that you should look at sustainability as an opportunity. And if you do that, you will be able to leapfrog and do many things. Now, Kulmeet, Vanita, between them have listed several areas in which we've done this. So let me make a simple point. Today, much of our conversations is structured around decarbonization, whether it is in energy production or perhaps in hard to abate sectors like steel, cement, etc. So when we look at decarbonization, what is it that the world is currently looking at? One is the area of renewables and the other is new fuels. When we look at renewables, I want to tell you that the target that India has set for itself, 450 gigawatts of renewable energy, about 300 through solar power by 2030, are perhaps among the most ambitious that anybody is doing in terms of decarbonizing the energy sector. And let me make another point to you. Given the fact that the pricing of this renewable energy, especially solar power in India, today during the daylight hours is as competitive as the best thermal units, we give a signal to the world. And the world is looking at it, it's looking at what we are doing. Because let me tell you, the world actually moves by seeing other role models achieving what they want. And that's when people come on board. So we started the International Solar Alliance. We are doing a lot of them. Let me leave another thought with you. We must do something on fuels. But I don't think this is something that we'll be able to do all by ourselves. We need to do collaboration. And I hope that the world will come together. Let me give you one simple example, one which is very much in the world today, and that is about hydrogen becoming a very important fuel. Now, for that to happen, some kind of major technological advances will have to happen, because today the energy required to break up a molecule which makes H2O into hydrogen and oxygen is perhaps more than the energy that will be discharged. We'll have to find ways of making these electrolytes. We have much to do on that. But let me take you back to what I mentioned. That, you know, sustainability, sustainable development is of course environment. But it is environment and planet plus. It is also the people. And there comes the issue of lifestyles, how we go about doing our things. And it is a question of sustainable production and consumption. We have some inherent advantages. You know, one of the things that I feel a little hesitant to talk about, but let me tell you, have you ever heard, or you all know, everybody in India knows the recycling business. We tend to talk about it like the kabaddi business with lots and lots of ills. We need to get so much of that right. But do you know, our recycling as a result of that is among the highest. I'm not saying we should encourage it. We need to find better ways of doing it. But what are we doing today? I look at the COVID pandemic and I look at urban India. What did we all move to do? We moved to e-marketing platforms. We moved to the Amazons and the big baskets and so on. And what are they doing? They're supplying everything in cardboard boxes, in plastic materials, etc. Can we make people aware of what exactly is going on? Can we try and see that the human beings behind this effort? And here today, before I pause, I want to tell your viewers very clearly, within the next 5 or 6 years, India will become the largest country in the world in terms of population. We have all grown up thinking that population is a burden. But let me tell you, that's the greatest asset that you have. And it's the asset that China leveraged, and it's the asset that we should try and leverage. But for that, A, we need to make our population more productive. We have a young population coming to the fore, but we need to make them more productive. B, we need to be technological savvy. We need to take this forward. We'll also become the third largest economy in the world. We therefore have every opportunity to be a global leader. But we must remember that sustainability and lifestyle are perhaps right at the bottom, the things which result in things being done properly. And we have an opportunity, since we are on the upward path, others are perhaps at the top of the plateau.
Let me just take that forward. Let me just take that forward with Vanitha. Vanitha, could India lead the way in sustainability? Although, could we do this without relying on the Western model of development of green technology alone?
Yes, because that has been the debate in, the Kyoto Protocol and various other, international space, that for India to move forward, we cannot follow the Western model completely, because, there are many factors in India. The West has already is a developed. There are many developed countries in the West, and we need to adopt our own model, the India model. Like what my esteemed panelists have said, that the industries, they're adopting, they're innovating, and they're adopting their own methods of achieving sustainability. What we need is more incentivization and less of punitive regulations, but more of goal-setting regulations, in order to incentivize the industries which are already trying to, like it has been said, that it is actually profitable for them. So they are actually trying to achieve. For example, even there are many other options that can be taken for boosting incentives, grant or subsidy. Phasing out old processes take time. So for setting up clean technology projects, so they should be training of personnel that should be given. The disruptions would have to be mediated well through the policies. New financial solutions to promote investment in greener projects, that needs to be seen. Technology facilitation mechanism for sustainable development goals from developed countries to developing countries, that can be thought out.
Okay, just taking that a bit forward, should the model for growth of new technology then, Vanitha, not run parallelly on incentives as well, along with mandatory compliances? Can that help? And also, we've seen recently a notification of business responsibility and sustainability report, which was in fact released by SEBI, which was, trying to rely completely on a compliance-based regime with penalties. But shouldn't we have perhaps a different model as well? Can that help or not?
Definitely, it has to go along with incentivization. For example, the clean cess that had been levied, the funds which are generated through all the regulations and the imposition of cess and compensation, etc., that needs to be rerouted towards incentivizing or setting up research and development labs which promote use of new technology. And SEBI did come out with these disclosure requirements in May 2021 on this business responsibility and sustainability reporting. And that, taking a cue from New Zealand has also come out with a similar law on disclosure, and it is not made compulsory for now. It would be made compulsory only in 2023. And under this, listed entities need to disclose about an overview of the entity's material environment, social and governance risks and opportunities, approach to mitigate or adapt to the risks, along with financial implications of the same. Now, this move, even though it appears to be punitive, but I feel that it is expected to bring in greater transparency and enable the market participants to identify and assess sustainability related risks and opportunities, and also help them in making investment decisions. For example, the New Zealand bill, which was similar in nature, it was taken due to the fact that financial markets globally can play a major role in shifting investment away from emission intensive activities. For example, businesses that are dependent on fossil fuel towards low emission businesses like solar and wind energy. So till now, the onus to meet the climate standards or being sustainable was on the high emission businesses themselves.
Okay.
way is to hit at the source by making the companies that invest in them answerable for the climate risks.
Okay, before I go to Anirban, Ambassador Puri, I think you wanted to add something to a point I raised earlier.
Yeah,
go ahead.
Thank you, Uday. Uday, I want to make a simple point. You asked about the India model.
Yeah.
I am a very convinced believer that we can't divorce ourselves from the world. We are part of the world. We, in fact, revel in being part of the world. And I believe we need to be in the leadership role in the world because, in a sense, that's our manifest destiny. Now, Vanita repeatedly mentioned the New Zealand bill. I think this answers the question that India is quintessentially part of the world. The technologies that we are looking at, what are we like? We're not doing completely different things. We're doing the same things that the rest of the world is. But I think one point that we must remember in India, and this is a particularly important point, we have a huge way to go on our development imperatives. We are perhaps the only country in the G20 which still has to meet the middle income country level. We have a lot to go. But look at the fact that our per capita emissions are also very low. Our per capita levels of consumption, etc., on all fronts is low. So we need to be focused on the need for development. But if we can utilize the space that we have got for ourselves, be sustainable and be mindful of sustainability, we would have been doing ourselves a favor, we'd be doing the globe a favor, the humanity a favor, and be in a leadership position, because ultimately the entire world will have to look at sustainability, which is absolutely critical for the human race.
Okay, coming back now to businesses and companies once again, and sustainable practices related to them. What are the actions, Anirban, that companies and businesses should take today vis-a-vis sustainability? We spoke earlier about how this is now a necessity rather than just a choice. We spoke also about how this can actually aid profitability. It should not be looked at as a burden. So in that context, what are the action, what are the steps that should be taken pronto by companies and businesses across the country? Anirban.
Absolutely, Uday. Some actions have become no-brainers today. If an organization is using anything other than LED lights, energy efficient air conditioners, energy efficient fans and motors, and renewable energy, they are literally burning money. Mm-hmm. If they are building any structure or are working in any structure that is not compliant with green building norms, they are ensuring that they will burn money forever. So adopting these energy efficient devices, working in green buildings, these are sure things that we must do right away. If people are moving cargo now within cities or a little beyond and are not using electric three-wheelers, which are eminently feasible today, one example is the Mahindra Treo, then they are incurring a higher cost and causing higher emissions than they need to. Every business must look at their products and make them more planet friendly and make new products that enable people to live planet friendly lives. These are things we can do today. There are more, but this would be a great start for any organization that has not started yet.
Okay, just taking it back now to Kulmeet Bawa. Kulmeet Bawa, coming to you now, of course, on what lies ahead now. So what kind of technology could we expect, which can come to further sustainable practices at work? What are some things to watch out for and look out for in the near future?
Yeah, thank you, Uday. And I just wanted to add, for something that Anirban mentioned on, the start point. And from a tech perspective, to fight climate change, it begins with first having an understanding, for example, of your carbon footprint from a business perspective. And today, many companies that we are seeing are struggling to measure the same, right? And it's a no-brainer that you can act only once you have the visibility and you know where you are. And then you can start to optimize across the supply chain, across the value chains, from raw materials to retailers to logistics service providers, all the way to the end consumers, right? So that's a start. Now, look, given that we are SAP and ERP has been the cornerstone of businesses for the last 5 or 6 decades, very, very clearly, Uday. And we do believe from an SAP perspective that we have an inherent advantage as well as a responsibility, right, in order to help enable these sustainable business practices that we are talking about. And, we've always been helping customers manage their top lines and bottom lines and financial supply chains and value chains, like I mentioned, the largest companies globally and in India. And today, I think we are very much in a position to help them, manage their green lines, which I think is going to become a metric very, very soon, to your earlier question on profitability and how all of this impacts. But what we are seeing, and I'll come to your point on what, we are seeing companies lacking the tools to integrate sustainability, as I mentioned. They've not been able to put some of these basic metrics into the fabrics of the applications or solutions, which is what we are trying to do. And in most cases where it is working, it involves a massive amount of manual efforts, or is limited just to within the confines of a company or within the company boundaries vis-a-vis the supply chain. So several initiatives are running globally. From our perspective, there's something that we are running which is top of mind for us called Climate 21, which essentially helps us embed sustainability into the applications natively. And what this is doing is that it is helping minimize carbon footprints. It's helping environmental health and safety solutions that are coming in. We have solutions around climate action all across the globe, whether it is product carbon footprint management, like I mentioned, because unless you measure it, you don't have a way forward. There's sustainability reporting solutions. We've got solutions around circular economy that we're about to launch.
Yeah.
So tons of solutions coming in the new age, essentially to reduce the whole footprint that we are talking about, to eliminate waste, to bring transparency into supply chains and make the whole process more ethical. And I do feel a lot is happening. I have the glass half full view, even from an India perspective. I didn't jump in then, but I think what I'm seeing, there is definitely an intent all over, and yet there is, we are clearly at the tip of the iceberg.
Okay. And I also have to ask you about, whether industry associations like ASSOCHAM, Kulmeet, can also help in this, in this fight. Can industry associations like ASSOCHAM help, particularly in giving feedback to government, on what's better going ahead in terms of latest technology that we can adopt, better sustainable practices, etc. What should be the role of industry associations like ASSOCHAM in all of this?
Yeah, so Uday, thanks for that. And absolutely, the answer is absolutely. Industry body associations can definitely help as a feedback mechanism. And I'll just pause. I'll just go back for a second, right, to what we were talking about India, and then we can come to ASSOCHAM. But there are three big areas, right? If I was to dovetail, and why I said that I have a glass half full kind of a viewpoint, but three big things from an India perspective. Number one is that businesses today need to play the true corporate citizen, good Samaritans, realizing the impact of their operations on the ESG issues at work, in order to mitigate risk. So that's number one. Number two is what Vanita was talking about, that governments need to come out with policies to incentivize businesses on sustainability practices. And that's where I think a lot of the industry bodies and associations need to play a more prominent role. And the third piece for me, and I think Manjeev touched upon it, is citizens, is us, right? Because we need to contribute a lot more at an individual level. We need to just continue to do our bit, right, in order to make the planet a sustainable place. And I'll hand over back to you, Uday, with one more point. When I say glass half full, in our country today, and I'm in, let's say in the last 30 days, I've had at least 12 meetings with head honchos, top brass of a lot of the largest conglomerates and companies in the country. I feel for sure that the awareness is increasing. We are at the edge of, perhaps just reshaping how we make our business decisions. And I'm seeing that up close. I'm personally quite impressed with how sustainability is figuring up top of mind from almost every single company that I'm talking to. just reflecting the importance and the urgency. And when it comes to consumers, to Manjeev's point, again, maybe I'm a diehard optimist, but a lot of them are soon going to be willing. They already are actually in nooks and corners, being a millennial country, being a young country. A lot of them are going to be willing to pay premiums for brands that are sustainable and environmentally responsible, right? And we started seeing flavors of that already. Uday, back to you.
Okay. Well, Vanitha, now, but the fact is, I just want to, we've been very optimistic, but it's also time for a quick reality check, and I want to get that from you. Despite judgments of the highest court in our country being aplenty on this matter, the situation, though, has not really changed much. It's practically the same, continuing to deteriorate also, though. On the contrary, that's what certain analysts say. Does this mean that judicial activism is not having much of an impact beyond newspaper headlines, beyond judgments that may have come out? Practically speaking, are things changing on the ground? Vanitha.
So I would say there has been a mixed consequence. For example, some of the directions which the courts have given have brought about a change. For example, the change of the transport buses from petrol to CNG, even the banning of pet coke. Definitely that has brought about a change, but the change has to change, bringing in a change only in one part of the society or only on just one factor. It can't really change the entire carbon footprint of the entire country. So, for example, the ban on pet coke was only limited to NCR. So, and on the other hand, some of the judicial orders have been impossible of compliance. For example, the order of bringing the transmission lines underground in say 1 year, right? Although it says that you have to check on the feasibility. So I do believe, yes, judicial activism has brought about certain changes, but like what if everyone has said, that it needs to be brought about in various other sectors, because judiciary will focus only on what is brought before them, the problem which is at hand. But so like leading industries, they are being very conscious about it. From what I've heard from Anirban, that they're taking steps, they're innovating on their own. But there are many industries who struggle, who might not have the wherewithal, the financials to bring about that change in their industry.
Okay.
So we need a push from the judiciary, yes, because the judiciary has even passed orders by which compliance has been brought about. Like they passed an order that air pollution control equipments, everything would be done, monitoring will be done digitally. So yes, change has been brought about by the judiciary, but we need more.
Yeah, we've touched upon the judiciary. We've touched upon, of course, companies themselves, and Anirban will weigh in on that once again. But Ambassador Puri, I want to quickly get you in here on the government as well. What kind of steps need to be taken by the government to further this cause as well?
Thank you, Uday. The government is pivotal. The government sets the agenda, doesn't it? Even the judiciary actually comes in to seek better compliance for what has been an intent of government. Now, she mentioned this case of the Green Line buses in India, in Delhi, the CNG buses. But the ideas itself have to come. So government in a developing country, and in fact across the world, is a particularly important point for both standard setting and directional move. Now, let me tell you this. The fact that the government of India has been speaking about 450 gigawatts of renewable power, is this not the biggest indicator to get the largest companies in India to say that the next oil is going to be renewables? And we all know where the signals come from. So governments have a particularly important role, and I think that role has been played in India by the government always and will continue to be played. Secondly, remember, it is the government which represents India in all places where we look at making global decisions, whether it's the United Nations or it's the Framework Convention on Climate Change or in the World Bank or anywhere else. The government therefore plays that very important catalytic role, and it sets the agenda. I think the governments in India, like governments in many other parts of the world, play this role well. Now, the challenge for a country like India are several. Because remember one thing, the West has done its bit, over-consumed, over-indulged in everything possible. We perhaps are paying the price for it. They too may be paying the price, but we are paying really the price for it. And our future becomes a future at stake. So we need to ensure that we have a certain amount of policy space with us. But at the same time, realistically, we also need to pony up to doing a lot of things which otherwise people would say why it is the responsibility of others. You would have heard this term called common but differentiated responsibility. It's a very interesting term. And we in India are extremely serious about both the common part as well as pointing out to the fact that there is a differentiation. You must do what is in the realm of your abilities and your capabilities. So I believe that government is a very important catalytic, a standard setting point, and its abilities to remain rightly focused would be critically important for the Indian society and the Indian economy.
Okay. Is that something you're in agreement with, Vanitha? What should be the government's role in all of this? What can the government do to ensure monitoring of regulations as well? What role should the government play? What steps have worked? What further can be done in your opinion?
So yes, there has definitely been, like what Manjeet said, that yes, the policy has been laid down. For example, the Electricity Act of 2003, that was the first legislation which really gave a boost to renewable energy, that renewable energy certificates, tariff, fiscal. So of course the government sets the agenda. But apart from that, like I think Manjeet already said that the ideas should come from the government instead of the judiciary pushing. It has been the other way around. For example, the judiciary pushes, there is a activist case filed, the judiciary looks into it, says, okay, there is a new technology, a committee is formed, and then the push is given and notifications are carried out. So if there is a dedicated cell or which really looks into development of technologies, and then there is a plan coming from the government that yes, these are the new technologies, we are going to incentivize you to adopt these in this manner. These are the regulations, that these are the mischief. Not all problems can be anticipated, but these are the problems that we anticipate in development of new technologies, because every technology can be counterproductive as well. So, and then frame a regulation, and then comes the compliance part, right? The compliance, of course, that the compliance needs to be strengthened. There has, of course, been an improvement, but again, the compliance we have seen comes when again the cases are filed in the courts and there's a push that it is not being done.
Okay. Anirban Ghosh, looking forward now, where do we go from here? Where does Mahindra go from here? What are the next steps, the follow-up steps? You're doing a lot already. What's going to happen next, and where is this sector headed henceforth?
Uday, thank you for that question. Before I jump into it, must acknowledge that a start has been made. Some people have jumped into taking action, but many more stakeholders have to be engaged. This is where associations can help. We are lucky that the Indian government is setting the direction in many ways. Ambassador Puri has mentioned a whole bunch of them. Overall, we must accelerate our journey towards becoming a net neutral world. To be able to do that, we must scale the adoption of technologies that are economically viable today, both within the organization and in the supply chain. Many of these technologies have been discussed already, so I will not repeat. We must also accelerate the pace at which technologies like storage batteries, clean transportation, green hydrogen, biofuels, flexible solar films, etc., become economically feasible, because we cannot become net neutral without them. These are industries of the future, industries that will help us achieve the goals in the Paris Agreement and the Sustainable Development Goals adopted by the United Nations. This is where we must go from here, Uday.
Okay, well, let's now get concluding thoughts from all of our panelists before we wrap up. Anirban, let me get you in here first. Any final comments from you? Any thoughts that you'd like to leave our viewers with today?
Uday, there is a lot we know that needs to be done. Even as we discuss what else is important, we must get started on doing the things we know that need to be done. Every single stakeholder must do that. Only then will we give ourselves a chance to achieve the goals that we have set for ourselves. Waiting for everything to fall into place before we get started will only get us into trouble.
Vanitha, last word to you. Any thoughts you'd like to leave our viewers with? Anything you'd like to say in conclusion which perhaps you missed out on earlier?
So it has to be a solution-oriented approach. So it has to be done together. That if there are any problems faced, the government, the regulators have to iron it out, and the industry, of course, should have the intent to really move towards sustainability.
Okay, Kulmeet Baba, your closing comments, sir.
Yeah, Uday, thanks. And look, I just want to say that I'm guessing our viewers and all of us are aware that, today we are consuming resources almost twice as fast or twice as much as what our planet can replenish, right? And at this rate, we will need an additional planet to sustain us. And I just want to say that, 2020 was one of the warmest years on record, and I guess this trend will continue unless we do something about it. In less than 7 years, global warming will clearly be irreversible. So inactivity is a luxury that, Uday, we really cannot afford to continue with any longer. And I think everything we've discussed, we need to get it into an execution mode, no matter how small the first steps are. Uday.
Okay, Ambassador Puri, last word to you. A thought as we conclude to leave our viewers with. You're on mute, sir.
Yeah, sorry. Uday, I am particularly grateful that a channel like yours, which is national television, is focusing on the issue of sustainability, and so is one of our apex chambers, ASSOCHAM. The more all of you will focus, it's not just industry, but the citizenry. Remember, even today, more than 50% of our population is engaged in rural India in the agriculture sector. Everyone will become more conscious of sustainability. We can't run away. We need a resilient planet. We need a planet with health. But we also simultaneously need a human population, a population in which there is development, in which we all go ahead and progress for our own benefits. We can't roll back the clock. And technology, which has perhaps got us to where we are, has got to be harnessed for finding the solutions. We are, therefore, I believe, in a world where if we look at collaboration, we will be able to find solutions faster and easier. And I sincerely hope that the world, and India leading it, will be pioneering efforts towards greater collaboration and cooperation.
All right. Well, that's a great thought to conclude on. And as our panelists have said earlier, the time to act is now. It's not a choice, but a compulsion now, a responsibility that we owe to ourselves and, of course, the planet and the world. Let's leave it at that. My thanks to all of our guests for joining us. Thank you so much for being with us today on this very important issue. I think it was a very holistic conversation. We hope to have many more such conversations in this domain in the days ahead as well. Thank you all very much. Let's take a break.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.
For more such videos, subscribe to the NewsX YouTube channel, hit the bell icon.